When you're younger, you have nothing but time and no money to do anything. And then when you get older, you have money to do things, but no time to do them. So yeah, you definitely have to figure out where you need to allocate your time. Where can you invest your time?
I've encountered some people that when they find themselves in a situation where they don't understand everything completely, or they don't know, they don't want to sound stupid or look stupid, and they try to deflect, avoid, and shift. And to me, that's not a recipe for success.
As I've grown older, I've realized that no matter what you want to do in life, you can do it if you're consistent. There are no such thing as fad diets. If you want to lose some weight, it's fairly simple, right? It's just about being consistent. That's the hard part.
And then a lot of us, we make a New Year's resolution and we're like, I'm going to work out 90 minutes a day.
Yeah.
Maybe, but that's
why gyms are empty in February, right? Because people set too high of a goal for themselves.
This is the Fundamentals of Software Engineering, and we are your hosts. My name is Nate Schuda.
And I'm Dan Vega.
And this is episode 4, Learning to Learn. If you spend any amount of time in the software space, you know the technology changes. It's the one thing you can absolutely count on. To be successful, to have a lengthy career in this industry, you must be able to quickly learn new things while also avoiding burnout, something we discussed in episode 2, Avoiding Burnout, where we're really good at naming things, aren't we, Dan? While it can be overwhelming to keep up, there are strategies you can apply to ensure that your skill set stays up to date that won't force you to forsake your family, friends, and your hobbies. How you doing, Dan?
I'm doing great. New year, new me. That's why we're talking about learning today, right? Everybody loves to start off on the right foot in the new year, read some books. Hopefully, this is one of the books that you're reading. Hopefully, somebody spent one of those Amazon gift cards on you and got you this book. But yeah, new year, new me. It's a great time to kind of reset and focus in on the things that you want to learn this year.
That's a New Year's resolution I can get behind. Read the Fundamentals of Software Engineering.
Yeah, that'd be really good. One of the things I wanted to talk about right away before we get into this is there is a chapter in the book called Learning to Learn, and that's what we're talking about today, right?
Absolutely.
And if you look at chapter 12, Learning to Learn, the quote inside of this, I love this quote. Live as if you were to die tomorrow. Learn as if you were to live forever. Mahatma Gandhi.
Yeah, love that. I think that school gives us this impression that learning is like this finite thing, and you only do it when you're in school, when you're
you're being told to, right? You're being instructed to learn.
Right. And, this is actually a conversation I had with my son, that learning never stops. It evolves, it changes, the topics change and evolve as your needs and interests do, but you should be kind of constantly picking up new things. I love that today I learned kind of thing. And to me, that's an important part of this. We've talked about this before, you and I, but I think when you look at our industry, the successful engineers that I know all have kind of this insatiable curiosity, and they're just we have this tinkering kind of mindset. It's like, how does that work? What's going on there? I want to learn about this. I want to play with this. And, I've encountered some people that when they find themselves in a situation where they don't understand everything completely, or they don't know, they don't want to sound stupid or look stupid, and they try to deflect, avoid, and shift. And to me, that's not a recipe for success. The best engineers I know, when they encounter something that they're not familiar with, their immediate thing is, Dan, tell me more about that. Dan, teach me that. Show me that. And to me, that's really an important part of being successful as a software engineer.
Yeah, and I have younger children, and that's one of the things we're trying to keep going with. And hey, you weren't assigned a book this week to read, but you should find a book and read it and have fun with it. And maybe you don't have to read one that was assigned to you, but hey, there's these amazing worlds that you can go explore in your mind with books, right? And yeah, I think as we've grown up, the times that we've learned is we've been told that we had to learn this thing. At work, you've been told that you have to learn how to use this tool or this language or this framework. But maybe on your own time, just kind of explore something that has nothing to do with what you're doing at your day job. Learn about artificial intelligence if you're not using it somewhere. Learn about some other framework, because learning how another framework attacks a problem and tries to solve it may help you in your day-to-day work, even if you're not using that language or framework. So learning is a wonderful thing. It's one of the reasons I love being a developer because I constantly get to learn.
Yep.
And it's the main reason I love being a developer advocate because I get paid to learn. I get paid to learn, and then I have to learn things twice, right? I have to learn things so that I understand them. And then I got to learn things well enough to go teach that back to someone else. So yeah, we've talked about this before, but if you are a software engineer, you have signed up for a lifetime of learning, and hopefully that's something you like. But also, as you pointed out, it doesn't need to be the root of burnout. You can focus on certain things and not try to learn everything because we are not going to learn everything, Nate. And the sooner we know that, the better.
What a bummer. Yeah. I mean, we don't live
I
in the
know.
matrix. Well, I don't think we do.
I
Maybe.
do
Not
really,
sure.
I really do like, I'm torn of this, right? Like, I would really
Yeah.
like to be in the matrix, be plugged in and just say, learn, go. But
Right.
like, that takes away a lot of the fun of it. Like, I learn from like failing and like,
Right.
oh, I missed that thing. I enjoy that process. So I'm torn. I would probably I'd probably sign up for it, but I'd also be a little disappointed that I just learned something in 10 seconds.
I mean, that would be kind of cool. I need to know how to fly a helicopter. Thanks. Like, yeah, like that would be slick, but that's just not how it works for us.
Even if I knew how to fly a helicopter, I am not flying a helicopter.
No, no. Okay. All right. Well,
No,
that's,
no.
today I learned that Dan doesn't want to fly a helicopter. I can
No,
understand that.
not at all.
You know, I think you make an interesting point there about how do we learn, and failure is part of that equation. And I don't think I fully appreciated that. As I've kind of thought back on it, but my son's a little older than your girls, but like any engaged parent, he'd come home from school, and I would ask, like, how was your day? And
Hmm.
I'm sure you get a similar response to what I usually get, which is
Yep.
a grunt. And, I
I
always
don't
felt
know.
kind of bad about that. "Yeah, it's fine. Well." And I was talking to another friend of mine with kids, and he said to me, "Well, Nate, our kids, when they're at school all day, they're failing. And that's kind of the gig, right?" And,
Yeah.
I thought about that. I'm like, yeah, I get it. I understand why you wouldn't want to discuss that. And I know Everett was complaining about some math thing he didn't understand. And I'm like, dude, if you already knew how to do that, they just give you something harder to do. Like, that's how this
Yeah.
works. Like, we're going to find the edge of your map because that's where the exploration happens. That's where the growth happens. And so I think one of the other aspects of our industry that we don't really talk about is you've got to be comfortable in that ambiguity, be comfortable with, I don't exactly know what's going on here. I think this is what's happening. And then again, having that mindset to, well, I'm going to get to the bottom of this problem.
Yeah. And failing a few times kind of gives you a framework for how am I going to solve this problem? And then that can become repeatable. Like, so at least you understand, like, I don't know this, but I know that I can find out why this is happening or what's wrong here, right?
And it gets easier. I think that's the other part of this. No one was born knowing how to write Java or Go or Rust or Clojure. We all had to learn it. And
Hmm.
the first one's always the hardest because you
For
don't really have
sure.
anything to compare it to. And then when you learn the second one, it's a little easier because now you can compare it to the first language you learned, and rinse, repeat. You start to see the patterns repeat themselves. And to me, that's the real advantage of experience is you can look back and go, oh, this is like that problem I had on the Wombat app and like the problem I had on the FooBar app. And you start to see those similarities, and it just gives you that larger corpus to kind of compare to.
I think something else to think about here too is that like we all have a personal preference when it comes to learning, and everybody has a different way of learning things. And you need to be okay with that. Just because Nate learns this specific way doesn't mean it's the right way. It's just the way that Nate understands like how to kind of understand those things that he's trying to go through. So what you have to find your own like learning style. There are a bunch of resources out there. There are different ways that you can learn. Usually it's a combination of things. And that's okay. It's just all about finding the things that work for you. So I'll put you on the spot here, Nate. When it comes to learning something new, again, you've probably got a pretty good framework for it. as many years of you that you've been doing this. But even maybe early on, like what are some ways that you enjoy like learning? How does it kind of stick for you?
Well, I'm a visual learner. There's no two ways about it. I'm a big golfer. You know that we've talked about that before. And for me, golf, I need to see it. And I've told my instructor this before. Like, listen, if you can show it to me and I can physically do it, I can do it. But
Yeah.
you can talk to me for an hour. That's not going to say, be like a lot of words. Okay, I heard some words, but I
Yeah.
need to visually see it. And I think one of the things that's so amazing about the space that we're in right now, Dan, is when you and I were first coming up in this industry, our options were pretty limited. We had books, and we had, I guess you might be able to get an in-person training if you were lucky. And, maybe there were some blog posts, but we're pretty lucky, I think, that we could come up in that environment. Nowadays, however, you have video, you have podcasts, you have countless tutorials. And so
Hmm.
you can find the thing that matches your learning style. So if you prefer like video is not my favorite thing, I'm not going to lie. I find myself because now a lot of times you do a search and a video comes back and I'm like scrubbing through the video. I just need to see the code. Just show me the code. And so I find that kind of frustrating. But yet I know a lot of people who just love that absolutely clicks with how they think. And
Yeah.
so the fact that you've got this plethora of sort of venues and options and modalities is just a huge win for folks today, I think.
Yeah, I'm going to take it back to golf because as someone who's kind of new to golf, I watched a ton of videos on YouTube on here's how you kind of improve your short game, here's how you chip, and here's how you putt. And I watch these videos, Nate, and I think to myself, wow, this is so easy. Why don't I do this? And I've watched hours and hours and hours. And then I go on the golf course and I'm like,
Wait,
what?
it's
I
harder than
didn't,
that.
it's a lot harder. I didn't just chip it onto the green and putt. Like
Hmm.
it's a lot harder than just trying to replicate something you saw. And so I think that is one of the traps of learning in this day and age is there are so many like videos out there and you could watch I have a 5.5 hour course on Spring AI. You could watch that and then go, oh, I know everything about AI and then
All
open
right.
an editor and go, oh, I don't know what to do now. Right. Um, so I think an important part of this is whatever medium you use to learn, whether it's written, whether it's video, whether it's some kind of podcast, that you need to take it in chunks and apply what you learn. And that's how we do it in school, right? If you went to a 4-year school or a boot camp or any other kind of way of learning, going through the great Nate in the University of Minnesota, however you're learning, they don't they don't come up on stage and say, "All right, I want you to listen to me ramble for the next 12 weeks." And then you're just going to go build something, right? You probably take a small piece of functionality, a small feature, some concept, and you talk about it and you apply some theory to it. And then you go, okay, now let's take that and actually apply it to something and go build something. So I think that's an important part of learning is being able to, you can find any kind of content that resonates with you today. You can find that. It's trying not to overdo that and trying not to take on too much at once and apply that to whatever you're doing.
Yeah,
So
you got
that's a big component for me.
Yeah, you got to decompose the problem, just like with software. You got to break it down, learn the fundamentals, learn the pieces along the way. To your point with golf, you don't immediately go on the first hole, grab your driver, and swing away. Most instructors are going to start you at the putting green and work your way backwards, and they're going to
Mhm.
teach you the fundamentals.
That's how Tiger's dad did it.
Yeah, and pretty effective there, to say the least. And so I think that's part of it is just understanding that it doesn't happen overnight. It takes time, and that can be frustrating. There's no two ways about it. It definitely
Yeah.
does look easy, and that's the best people do make it look easy. And that doesn't mean you can't get there, but it's just have to be patient and work through the process, and you'll get there if that's what you want to do.
And I think, I think a lot of people are excited about AI because they view it as a shortcut to
Mm.
learning how to be a software engineer. Like, oh, all that pain you went through, Dan, I don't have to do that. because I have these tools now. And like, that's not the case. It's not a replacement for learning. It can be a tool to help you learn, just like all of these other mediums we talked about. But it is not a shortcut to becoming a software engineer. You don't just put a tool in your hand and go, I can do this. You talk about this a lot. There are so many tools. I've bought a lot of them for my house. Like, I still don't know how to use them really good because I don't use them every day, right? I can use traditional tools, a hammer, a screwdriver, but you give me some fancy thing for drywalling and I'm still not going to drywall. I'm going to let somebody else do that.
Yep, absolutely. I think part of the challenge that so many of us face, and again, we talked about this in episode 2, is there's almost a limitless number of things that you could invest your time in. And I think it's overwhelming. It absolutely can be. I mean,
Yep.
you could pick even just one component of our space and there is, a lifetime of learning almost in front of that, if that's something you really want to go deep on. And I think that that's something that a lot of us struggle with. And there is kind of this FOMO, this fear of missing out that, well, I need to be an expert on everything.
Yep.
You can't. Like, that's just not possible. You're going to have to focus. There's going to be some waves you're going to have to let go by, and that's okay. So I think, this is something we've talked about in the past, but you really do need to let your passion guide you. If this is something that you're excited about, it's so much easier to make the time. If you dread it, you're never going to carve out 20 minutes, 30 minutes, an hour in your day to explore it.
Yep.
It's always going to get kicked down to the bottom of your list. I've used this example before, but at some point in my career, I sat down, I was going to read a book about databases. I'm going to learn more about databases. And I don't even remember which book it was. It doesn't even matter. And I wouldn't name it even if I could. I don't want to, it was a great book. It's just not for me. I think I read for about 20 minutes and then sat it down on my table and went upstairs and organized my sock drawer. And not a
It's good
euphemism.
use of time.
Yep, literally went and organized my sock drawer. And so it's like, obviously I'm not passionate about that. And your passions are going to move throughout your career as well. There's things that you might be really excited about for 6 months. Sometimes it's 6 days. And sometimes like, no, this is my thing. And I have found my passion. That's great. But it's okay for that to shift around and evolve and move.
And I think it's important to note, this is not something just new developers experience or junior developers. I've been doing this 24 years and I still look on social media and go, oh my gosh, the newest large language model is the greatest ever. And I don't know how to use it. And like, yeah, there is a sense like I know the things that I need to learn and I still get caught up like, oh my gosh, especially in the world of AI these days, that is moving so fast. I'm trying to keep up with what's going on there. And it seems like, a new large language model comes out, the benchmarks state it's the greatest thing ever. And then 2 days later, a new one comes out, the benchmarks say that it's now the greatest large language model ever. So it is hard. We have this thing called the shiny new thing paradox that you wrote about in the book. What is that?
This is an example to me of like resume driven design. I see this constantly where some new piece of technology comes out and it solves a problem we couldn't solve before, or maybe it does it in a more elegant way. And a lot of times it'll come out of one of the sort of big technology companies, and there'll be blog posts and there'll be videos and conference talks, and everyone's like, oh my God, we need to add that to our project, or else, we're not cool, we're not hip. And I've been in some conversations where people are like, well, why are we using this ancient language Java when we could be using something brand new? It's like, okay, last time I checked, the bits don't rust, but we can talk about that. And if you have a good reason to use the shiny new thing, then by all means, let's talk about that. And it's important to know where to use a tool. It's also really important to know where not to use a tool. I think I've used this analogy with you before. You could use a screwdriver to pound in a nail. That is possible.
Possible.
It's not going to be very enjoyable. And I don't think it's the most efficient way to do it. And so part of, I would say, maturing in this space is knowing when I should reach for that new thing, and knowing when it's like, no, you really need to be this tall to ride. And that might mean you use something that isn't as bleeding edge as another option. And I think a lot of folks don't understand the full trade-off or the full consequences
Yeah.
of using that shiny new thing.
Yeah.
And I also like to point out to folks that that shiny new thing evolves, and what we were all super hyped about 5 years ago isn't
You may
something
not
we're
be
probably
excited
even
about.
talking about today, right?
Right.
And yet the irony is it's probably more useful today because we've sort of worn away the rough edges, and that abstraction has gotten coarser, and so it's simpler to use than it was before. And I think people sometimes we're getting this big rush. It's like, well, do you really want to be a test pilot? Because those folks don't get life insurance. Like that's
Right.
not an option for them. There's a trade off to being the person that goes and tests this new thing,
Yeah.
and just have to understand those consequences.
Yeah. And if you're the person that's suggesting this new tool or this new language or this new framework and nobody else knows it, like you have to remember that now you're on the hook for this, right?
Mm-hmm.
One of the things, I don't know, I don't know your exact saying around this. One of the things that you say a lot is that you believe people should stay around long enough to see the consequences of their decisions, right?
100%.
And why is that?
Well, because to your point, I've seen a lot of instances of what I call the Galapagos Island problem, where an engineer, usually it's someone who is particularly, maybe influential, or they just shout louder than everybody else, or maybe they just do it and don't ask for permission. And so they'll bring in something brand new that no one has ever seen before. No one knows how it works, how to maintain it,
Yep.
et cetera. And they'll just sort of, maybe they go through the process, maybe they just deploy it and dare you to stop them. And then they leave. And now we've got this thing that no one else understands. No one knows how to maintain it. No one knows how to build it. And it becomes like a game of rock, paper, scissors. Oh, okay, Dan, it's your turn to go in there, man. Like I did it last week, and there's a real cost to that, to an
Yeah.
organization, and so I think what a lot of developers don't understand is autonomy comes with accountability. And so I think folks look at like Netflix, where Netflix gives their developers a tremendous amount of autonomy to use the right solution for the job. And this is one of the consequences of a microservices architecture is it does free you from sort of that one tool to solve them all. I think a lot of companies for many, many years define themselves by their technology stack. We're a Java shop, or, we're a, .NET shop. And there's advantages to that. But it also puts you in a situation where, well, maybe I'm not using the best tool for the job. Maybe I am trying to use a screwdriver to pound in a nail when I really should just go get a hammer. But we also then need to say, well, if I'm going to go use this esoteric thing that isn't used anywhere else in my organization, and I'm the only one that knows it, or it turns out I made a bad choice. This actually isn't the hammer that I reached for. It's a different kind of screwdriver. Well, there's going to be an uncomfortable conversation in my future.
Mm.
And so we just need to understand that it isn't just as simple as, oh, good, now I get to put it on my resume, or, well, I'm jealous that my friend gets to use this at their job, and so I want to use it at my job. And it's like, well, why do you need to do this?
Yeah.
I'm a big, big believer in ADRs, architectural decision records. And to me, they're a good sort of sieve for these kinds of things. And so, I was on a project recently where I had a person who was very adamant that, we need to use this particular technology, and it just didn't seem like the right fit. It's like, it would be wonderful if we had the level of traffic that required something as heavyweight as that, but you're just not there yet. We all hope that that's in our future here, but today that's just massive overkill for what you're trying to do. And so part of how we help kind of shape that conversation is, well, what's the ADR that says we should use this? And if you can't write an ADR that justifies this and then defend it to your teammates, okay, well, now we've given you an opportunity to have that conversation, and hopefully you've learned that I could go get a semi to deliver 10 bags of mulch to my house this spring, or I could just take my SUV and grab 10 bags of mulch.
Right.
So it's just, you got to understand, when do I need that bigger tool, and when is that just massive overkill?
On the flip side, maybe you write an ADR and maybe it plays out that technology is needed, and that's great.
Absolutely.
That's a learning experience from that.
Absolutely.
And I think for younger engineers, and by younger, I just mean in years of experience, not age, because I had the same problem. Like I would get to new positions and go, why are we limited to like these technologies? And it's like, I just want to use whatever I want to use, right? And it's for that reason alone. Like, we want to make sure that if you are to get hit by a bus today or leave, like, you're not the only person who can support that. So it's not that companies move slow at times, yes, but it's not that they're up there trying to restrict you from using things you want to use. It's just a much better use of their time to make sure we have coverage over this tool or this language or this framework in case you're not around anymore.
And there
So,
may be constraints that you don't know about. There may be other things at play,
yeah,
and sometimes those are good reasons, and sometimes those are
sometimes not so
just
good.
not so good reasons, right? I mean, we've
Maybe,
had that situation where, well, I just don't like that company, so we're not using that. Like,
yeah. Or maybe the
okay.
CTO is getting a kickback on some
Yeah,
technology
I've
they're
seen that
using.
too, right? Where it's like, oh, this seems a little sus here. We're using this because why? Oh, okay. The CTO came from there. Oh, okay. Well, now it makes more sense. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Well, part of this then is if we're being told what to use and we have all these shiny new things out there that Nate and Dan are saying, don't just go chasing those things. I have this fear of missing out, Nate. Like, I want to use these things. My friends are using these. Do I need to leave this job? I don't know the answer to that because I don't know the circumstances, but there is such a thing as fear of missing out. And maybe you can't use it on your day to day job, but you can always start using it in a side project.
Yeah.
And this comes back to learning new things that maybe you don't need during your 9 to 5 job. And that's okay. That is good. You usually work on the same types of applications at your work. You're probably relegated to like a certain stack and you do the same things over and over. And so I like using side projects or just tinkering or learning a new thing, an opportunity to get rid of some of that FOMO. Oh, I tried this new thing. Turns out it was just a little bit of hype on social media. This is not something I need to use. So FOMO is real. How do you deal with it?
Well, I mean, part of it again is having a bit of a radar around. Ooh, this is really
Ooh,
hyped,
yeah,
and is this really something I want to invest my time in? And I think there are a lot of instances where pausing for a minute can actually be really beneficial. I think maybe this is just because I've been around a long time, but I've seen the pattern repeat itself, and I've seen some of these technologies come and go, and I do feel like you get a bit of an instinct for, oh yeah, no, this one is really going to be a bit of a game changer, or this will
right.
really change how we do business, and others are like, this is a flash in the pan, like this, we're not going to be talking about this in 2 years.
Yeah,
But I also think your own passions do have to guide you here, and what
for
is it
sure.
that you're excited about, and what is it that gets you motivated, and sometimes, we've talked about this before too, when do I change jobs? And sometimes that can be an indicator as well, where it's like, man, I just keep solving the same problems over and over again. And then
Hmm.
you see that new thing that lets you do something that's different. And I do think there's a lot of benefit to that. One of the things that I really appreciate about teaching is my grad students all come from different industries. And so pretty much every cohort, I think I've had at least one student that works in like embedded or in sort of health, life sciences kind of an area, which has a very different set of constraints and kind of the enterprise web apps that I think I've spent, literally the entire of my career building. And so that has really helped me understand some of the constraints that I haven't had to face in my professional career. It also maybe helps me appreciate that I don't really think I want to work in sort of like life critical systems. Like that's not high on
Yeah,
my list. But you start to understand that, well, if I'm embedding this on a device, that has very different constraints than, well, I'll just spin up more compute. What's the problem?
right. I I'm trying to think about this from another perspective. Like I own some shares of some stocks, not many. But I'm trying to think of this like from a day trader's perspective. Imagine if they got on social media and just listened to every TikToker or tweet saying, this is going to be the next major breakout stock. You got to buy this one. If they were to do that and just buy every stock, they would probably not be in their profession today, right?
Yeah.
Instead, they probably see a lot of the noise and then try to figure out which ones are actually worth the hype. So you have to do a little research into this. Like, is this thing something worth learning? One, does it align with my career goals? That's probably number one. if it does, there's probably a big pool of things to learn there too. How can you kind of whittle that down to the things you want to learn? Yeah. So one, does it align with my career goals? Two, is this something that is just a lot of hype right now? Or is this something that I think is going to be around in a few years? And that there's no easy answer to like figure that out. But I think the more research you do and the less reactionary you are to seeing a few tweets or videos about it, the better you're off you'll be.
That day trading is an interesting analogy because I think portfolio theory can apply here as well.
Yep.
I mean, the person who manages my retirement account, our money is spread across multiple different types of investments. It
Right.
isn't all just in one stock. It isn't all just in one industry, and that's this idea of you spread your risk out. And
Right.
so technology skills to me are the same, that you
Mm-hmm.
probably want to put the majority of your time and effort into those solid skills that are necessary and will, help you
Foundational.
either on your current, those foundational skills, the day in, day out kind of, bread and butter stuff. But you're going to allocate a portion of your sort of learning time to something that is maybe a little more speculative.
High risk.
Yes, higher risk, higher reward. And,
Yeah.
and, the percentage of that obviously varies over your career and kind of where you're
Yep.
at and what you want to do. I mean, if you're happy with where you are and your current role, then maybe that speculative part's a smaller chunk of your learning budget, if you will. If you're itching to make a change or you're looking like I'm going to go into something that's a different part of software or like, well, I've done mostly development, but now I really want to get into machine learning. Okay, then you're going to maybe allocate a larger, portion of that learning budget to something that might be a bit more speculative. And, I think that's part of this too, is kind of knowing where to spend your time. We don't have unlimited time, and I think that's another thing you grapple with, especially as you get older, is like, all right, well, how do I want to spend this weekend or tonight or whatever it is that you can carve out to play around with stuff.
Yeah, it's funny. I always see those memes of like when you're younger, you have nothing but time and no money to do anything. And then when you get older, you have money to do things, but no time to do them. So
Nature of the beast.
yeah. Yeah, you definitely have to like figure out where you need to allocate your time. Where can you invest your time? One of the things we mentioned in the book is this idea of a technology radar. So I think before technology radars, I would have my sheet of things I want to learn. And this was, analog media at one time. It turned into digital. Then it got more sophisticated and I would group things. And I would, again, shiny new object syndrome. I would see this thing. Yes, I want to learn that. And instead of just learning that right away, I would kind of put these into buckets and say, all right, we'll revisit this in another couple of weeks. Is this something I want to learn? And I've had a list of things I would like to learn for as long as I could remember. And a lot of them just went off and I never learned them, and that's okay. Some of them, I've realized that that's something I need to get better at, and I went off and learned it. So this idea of a technology radar, as opposed to my list of things I want to learn, how can we take advantage of this, and what is this?
Yes, I'm a huge fan of the idea of a technology radar. That's something that actually grew out of ThoughtWorks several years ago. And I will say that I have been a huge fan of the radar since long before I was an employee. I've recommended it for many, many years. I've built them both for companies and for myself as well. And the thing I've always appreciated about it is it sort of gives you a framework for how to think about technologies, where to group them. The technology radar, as we produce it, has 4 quadrants and there's 4 rings. And basically the outer ring is things that you're either like, ooh, we're really, really early, or ooh, it's on its way out. And then as you kind of move your way into the center ring, by the time you get to adopt, like, you should absolutely be using this, no question.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, what I love about it is it gives a company an opportunity to see, well, what is our technology portfolio look like, and where do we want it to be? Are there things that we're using that we'd like to move on from? Are there things that we would like to adopt and we haven't gotten there yet? And so it helps you, I think, kind of think about that more methodically. It helps you personally understand, where do I want to spend my time? Like, I make my grad students do one of these, and then we spend part of a class period talking about it, because I want them to think about, once you get out of grad school, you are now completely responsible for this. Right now you've got people like me kind of doling these things out for you to pick up, but once you graduate, you have to kind of take up that role for yourself. And so be planful about it. And even just jotting things down in a note to me is very helpful. Is what you'll see is stuff will repeat. And that's a pretty good indicator that, oh, yeah, I do need to spend some time on here. I think if you look at your list, there's a pretty good chance some stuff you've written down 2 or 3 or 4 times. To me, that's an indicator that there's a there, and that it keeps
Hmm.
bubbling up to your interest. And so maybe it's worth your time to explore it. And other things you jot down and you're like, 6 months later, oh God, why'd I put that on my list? Glad I didn't spend any time on that.
Right.
It's sort of like an impulse purchase. I think we
Yeah.
can all have a short attention span from time to time. And it's really easy to just,
Yeah.
buy. And it's like, oh, did I really need that? Like if you wait a day or two, do you still want it really badly? Well, then okay.
Right.
But, give it that beat to just let it settle.
Yeah, one of the things I do in a lot of videos that I put on YouTube is I start with the why. Like,
Mm-hmm.
why should you care about learning this thing? Because just because everybody's shouting it from the rooftops, go learn this thing, doesn't mean you need to learn this thing. Maybe there's a subset of people that need to learn it. I'll give you an example. For the last few years, I've been talking about GraphQL.
Yep.
And GraphQL for a long time was one of those buzzwords, like, oh, everybody needs to learn GraphQL. And the first thing I do when I talk about GraphQL is like, not everybody needs to learn GraphQL. There are certain situations where GraphQL is really good. And if these are one of the situations you're in, hey, you have a lot of clients accessing an API. Maybe you don't need all of the fields. Maybe you're making multiple requests to get the same data. There are a bunch of things that there are a bunch of problems that GraphQL solves. But maybe you're not in that problem space. But if you are, I'd like to show you some things about GraphQL because this is going to help that. So I always tell people whenever you want to learn something new, why? Why do you want to learn this? Not just to put it on your resume, not just because some influencer on X or Twitter, I hate calling it X, just because they're there
Always be
shouting.
twitting to me.
Yeah, yeah. Just because they're shouting it from the rooftops. What is your why for learning that thing? And again, if there's a reason, maybe I can use this at work. This is going to solve one of our problems. Now I can go to my boss and say, I have a substantial reason why we should be using this new technology. It's going to solve that problem that we keep running into, and it's going to fix a lot of things. It's not just going to put something on my resume, right?
Yeah, and it's that ability to know where to use a tool and where not to use a
Yeah,
tool. My experience, developers are really good at coming up for an excuse why they should use some shiny new thing. And a lot of times it's like, well, because that's the enterprise grade solution. We need to
right.
use Kubernetes because Kubernetes.
Oh my gosh.
Cool. You know the name. Like that's an important part of this, but why do we want that? Well, what problem does that solve? And I wrote this little toy app to keep track of Everett soccer stats. I could have spun up a Kubernetes cluster and deployed it on there, but I didn't need that. Like this had 3 users. So that would have been dramatic overkill for what I was trying to do. And so it's important to know not just, well, I want to use this tool because it can do ABC, but this is the wrong time to use that tool. And I
Right.
think that's kind of a level of maturity that takes some people longer to get to than others. And I think sometimes we really get caught up in, well, but I heard influential company is doing this, or I saw
Yeah.
a video online and it looks really cool. And I was told that
Yeah.
this would make me enterprise grade. Yeah, but do you need it? And do you understand all of the overhead that comes along with it? And I
Right.
think that's where
Right.
people get into some trouble.
Yeah, I heard somebody was telling me about a friend who vibe coded this app and did the same thing, threw it on a Kubernetes cluster. I'm like, you could have literally put that on a $5 VPS. You don't need a Kubernetes cluster for that. When you get to a place where you need a Kubernetes cluster, that's a good problem to have. I often relate this to kind of the database, like right when Twitter was coming up, right? It's like, well, Twitter moved to this document storage or NoSQL database because they needed to do that to
Right.
handle the connections. And back then, everybody was starting a new project with that same type of database in that same structure. I'm like, you're not Twitter.
No.
You are not at that scale yet. If you get to that scale, you will have probably 1,000 engineers to help you solve that problem, and you'll be in a good place to solve that problem. You need to, wherever you're at right now, use the right tool for the right job. I'm not saying you shouldn't look towards the future and plan for the future, but you don't need to spin up a Kubernetes cluster right now for your 3 users. You can plan for that
Right.
later.
Yeah, I mean, we want our solutions to evolve, and I think
Yeah.
that's always one of the real challenges we face is how do I create something that doesn't paint me into a corner without getting so speculative that I got a bunch of stuff that I ain't going to need anyway. You know, there's Yagni at play here as well, and so it sometimes is also being willing to have that hard conversation. Of, well, how many users would you say you have right now?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, you have
Yep.
40,000. Okay. Well, then we don't need this to geographically fail over to, a completely another region. And we don't need to run this on another cloud provider at the same time because you have a retailer, crazy amount of load that happens as the holiday season approaches. And you
Yep.
cannot afford to go down. You have a business requirement here that you're willing to pay the price to make that happen. You
Right.
have 40,000 users. Like that's not the end of the world for you. And so I think it's getting
Right.
comfortable with those conversations and it's understanding where you are today. Yeah, I think we get in this mindset of, oh, we're a rocket ship and we're going to, we're like logarithmic. And before you know it, we're going to have, 100 million users. Awesome. Are we
Great.
there now? No? Okay, then let's not build for 100 million users because that's going to
Right.
make things a lot harder. And I was talking to one of my grad students about this, and she works for a retailer. And we were talking about how in these distributed architectures, it can be really hard to debug because, you see the transaction and then it goes here and then it goes here and you're like, wait, where'd it go? It disappeared. She's like, yeah, that's a real problem that I have to face. And so what would have been simpler if this had been a monolith and she could just, put a breakpoint in and go step, 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 but that would not handle the business load that they get. They just that the number of transactions that they are getting would fail over. And so you would no longer be viable. And so the business requirement is, yeah, sorry, we got to make her job harder, but
Right.
that's what it takes to solve the business need. And so you want to wait until that problem is there or it's around the corner before you invent and go to this solution that, well, this can handle this amazing scale, but we're not there today. And so now you're taking on that additional pain and burden for no benefit.
Yep. I want to give you a little bit of a personal reference to this because I am a Java developer. I am a Spring developer. I've had a personal website for as long as I could remember. And for a long time now, that personal website has been in Vue, in something called Nuxt. I use Tailwind. And sure, I could have used Java. I could have used Spring and like spun up this application and hosted it somewhere. The hosting probably would have cost me a little bit more money because it's a server app, right? But I also took this as an opportunity to say, I've already learned all that stuff on my day job. Like, I want to learn some more front end skills and I want to be more of a front end developer. So, how can I do that? I can build something that I'm passionate about, which is my personal website. It has like a blog, it has a whole bunch of features. And I learned Vue at the time. And I was like, I want to like learn more about Vue and Nuxt and Tailwind. And so it gave me an opportunity to like learn those skills. I'm not I'm not saying that like I couldn't use Spring and Java for this, but like right tool for the right job. Like when I'm building static content, I don't need a whole server restarting to like come up and have things spin up, right? Like I'm serving static content. So this was the right tool for the right job, even though it's not the thing that I use every single day. And again, it gave me an opportunity to learn something outside of my kind of day-to-day work. So
Yeah, 100%. I do think that's an important part of this is how do you find those opportunities to
yeah,
practice it? And a side project works really well for that, scratching your own itch, something that you want that helps you, and it doesn't have to be the most, bulletproof system ever invented.
yeah,
The app that I wrote, believe me, there's plenty of edge cases there that I didn't even bother to solve because I just didn't care. I mean,
yeah,
there's been a couple times where I just go directly into the database to change that. Now,
yeah, yeah,
that's okay because again, I have 3 users. It's not a problem, and I'm safe. I know how to go in, and I don't think I've ever screwed anything up doing that. And I've only done it a couple of times. But if I had to do it 3 or 4 more times, oh, okay, I better build this feature now.
hmm,
And so it's kind of understanding sometimes what you really need versus well, that's a nice to have, or I'll wait until I absolutely need it before I go ahead and invest the time in it. But yeah, it's
yeah.
important to find those opportunities to practice.
So we have this idea of consistency. As I've grown older, I've realized that no matter what you want to do in life, you can do it if you're consistent at it. There are no such thing as fad diets. Like if you want to lose some weight, like it's fairly simple, right? It's just about being consistent. That's the hard part. If you want to learn something new, again, it's the new year. We all want to like set some goals and learn some things. There are some frameworks for doing this, but the biggest framework there is consistency. And I think it's important not to overload yourself. Don't shoot out of the gates on the new year and say, I'm going to read 24 books this year. Like if you've never read 5 books in a year, 24 is probably a little bit too much, right? So I love, we have some notes here. Was this from Chris Judd, our kind of learning as a habit, or is this something you put together?
Yeah, so I was definitely influenced a bit by some of the stuff that Chris gave us in feedback. But to your point, it has to be something sustainable.
Yes.
And it has to be something that does become second nature, habitual, and streaks can help here. I know I personally respond well to that, to the point where I think my wife has made cracks about, you're a slave to your watch. Your watch says you got to get up and stand, so I get up and stand, but
that's good.
I like
any way that you can get that to happen.
Yep, absolutely. And so as an example, I've started a streak on my reading books. I think it's like 5 minutes a night, and I think I'm almost at 900 straight days. And I think my streak before that was like 850 or something like that. So
that's awesome. Congrats.
Yeah, thank you. And it's 5 minutes a day. And I think a lot of us look at it and we think, well, my God, I need to read this entire book this weekend.
Right.
If you can, if your schedule allows that and your energy level, fantastic. But can you read a chapter? Is that more attainable? And so finding that smaller goal that you can then sustain over time. And, one of the things that I've done throughout my career is what I refer to as morning coffee. And so I make my grad students do this too. They get to learn from all of my sort of neurotic behavior, I guess. But yeah, and coffee helps too. You take that first part of the day, the first 15 minutes, half hour of your day while you're drinking your first cup of coffee or tea or energy drink or, whatever, is your beverage of choice. And you peruse the news, whatever that means for you. And that could be listening to a podcast. That could be watching a video. That could be working through a tutorial. That could be scrolling, social media. But you just make it a habit of, hey, what's going on? What's happening? What's interesting in my space? And the things you're following will probably change over your career depending on, your current career goals, your current passions, the things that you're learning and excited about. But if you just approach it as just like 20 minutes here, half an hour there, that's a lot more sustainable than I'm going to devote 3 hours every single Thursday. That's hard to do. That's hard to do for more than maybe a few weeks. When your motivation's high, that's might be doable. And a lot of us, we make a New Year's resolution and we're like, I'm going to work out 90 minutes a day.
Yeah.
Maybe, but that's
why gyms are empty in February, right? Because people set too high of a goal for themselves. And it's like,
yep, exactly.
If you realize that you can just be consistent with these things, it's so much easier.
Yeah, it's doing ordinary things extraordinarily well. And I think that's something we get kind of caught up in, is that, I need to be able to do this crazy thing. Like, well, but can you just do the ordinary thing? And, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, and find those pockets in your day. I mean, I know my son's older now, and so less required of me in terms of chauffeuring and whatnot. But when he was younger, I would take advantage of like those gaps in my day that would naturally occur by me having to drop him off and wait for him or something. It's like, okay, I got 20 minutes while I'm waiting. I'll listen to this podcast, or I'm driving him somewhere. And so I'll listen to a podcast, or I'll read this while I'm waiting for him to be done with, soccer or whatever it is. And so, part of it too is finding where those gaps are in your schedule that you can exploit.
And if you only have 5 minutes, listen to it on 2X. That's what I do.
Absolutely. I've listened to a lot of podcasts on more than 1X.
My wife gets in my car when that automatically starts. How do you listen to this? I'm like, I have limited time and I want to consume knowledge. So this is my only way to do it.
100%.
So I like this that we have here. Learning is a habit. Consider how you could schedule this approach throughout the year. So taking on like a weekly basis, maybe listen to a podcast, watch a video or two, read an article or two. This doesn't mean that you'll have to consume a 5.5 hour course in a couple days, right? Knock this down to something realistic. Monthly, read a technical or business book. Maybe read a book for fun that isn't related to your job at all, right? That could be a lot of good use of your time. Attend a user group or meetup. Take an online course. So that's at a monthly level. And then maybe at a yearly level, attend a conference, learn a new programming language, invest in a side project, get a certification, teach or deliver a technical presentation. And I love this because this is really how I look at my goals for the new year. I say, what are my big goals for the entire year?
Yeah.
Okay, those are the things I want to accomplish. How does that break down into a monthly thing? How does that break down into a weekly thing? And as you said, if I see that that's too much is going to happen in a week, then okay, I need to realign my goals because I know that I'm never going to get there. So if we can kind of figure out on a weekly, on a monthly, on a yearly basis, what we can tackle, that's good. Do that for months. If you do it for 6 months and you're like, I have plenty of time left, great. Change those goals. They're not set in stone, right?
Yeah. So Chris Judd also has a great way of phrasing this in terms of like a learning depth strategy where, your survey level is you listen to a podcast or maybe you attend a user group, you kind of do that sort of surface level look. And
Yeah.
then you can take a little deeper dive. Maybe you watch a couple more videos, you read some blog posts, maybe you work through a tutorial. You can do a deeper dive and go maybe to an in-person training, or you start reading more of the books on the topic. If you want to do a really deep dive, volunteer to give a presentation or lead a workshop or a class, or you can do what Venkat does, which is just write a book about the topic. I mean, that's
Yeah.
the
Just say,
ultra deep dive.
I'm going to
The
learn this. I'm
mileage
going to write a
maker.
book.
Yeah, I mean, he's remarkably lifelike, but that is Venkat's approach to learning something is I'll just write the book about it.
I would not advise that. It took us a year and a half for this one.
No, I think that's a very advanced technique, and your mileage will definitely vary on that one. But
Yeah.
I will say a lot of this is also kind of finding that community, and when I had a corporate job, I spent a lot of time doing lunch and learns.
Yeah.
And you find the folks on your team or in your area or just even in your whole company that are also interested in that, and that can help give you that extra motivation. That can be the really hard part is I need to read a chapter. Well, if I'm leading our little inner user group, our little lunch and learn session on this tomorrow, I better read the chapter because I'm going to be the one leading the discussion. And it doesn't mean I have to lead it every single week. I love to see that rotate, give everybody a chance at that. But I think that can be another good avenue for, trying to find that motivation and just that little extra kind of kick to go through something.
This is very random, but I'm just thinking about it. I would also go to meetups if it has nothing to do with what I want to learn. So let's say that Nate, you're giving a talk on Kubernetes tomorrow at our lunch and learn. And I want to learn about this. I don't really care about this thing. I don't want to learn about this thing, but I have a free hour and I'm not doing anything at lunch. I'm just going to sit there and eat my lunch and listen to Nate talk for an hour. Those can be valuable because some of the most valuable things I've picked up had nothing to do with what the speaker was talking about. It was maybe some keyboard shortcut in some app that I use all the time or some tool that I didn't know about. So sometimes just kind of being around that stuff helps out, even if it's not what you think you don't want to learn, right? Maybe you end up actually enjoying that thing or learning something new from the speaker. So if you have the time, take the time to sit in on, especially those work lunch and learns can definitely be useful. And then even like meetups, man, I've met so many great people at meetups and made so many connections in my network. Again, maybe it wasn't on a topic I was super excited about, but they had free pizza and there were people there and I wanted to get out of my house.
Yep.
Those have been valuable as well. So don't always take everything as like it's life or death that I go learn this thing. Sometimes just treat it as getting out, having a little fun, hanging out with people, and maybe you'll learn something new. That's how I treat conference talks, right? Like, I'm not going to learn like everything in an hour, but if I pick up like one thing to go home with at a conference and like I'll deep dive on that later, then job well done, sir.
Oh, 100%. I've always felt as a presenter, if I can give one or two people in the audience one or two nuggets, I've done my job. That's the goal is to give. Ideally, I give everyone multiple nuggets, but at a minimum, if I give one or two people one or two interesting things, then I've done my job for the day.
Yep.
And to your point, I think there's a lot of value in periodically kind of going outside your proverbial comfort zone and
Yeah, for sure.
go to a presentation or watch a video or read about something that isn't in your wheelhouse. You might learn something, or it might spark something like, whoa, I didn't even know that was possible. Or, gee, I haven't really spent much time in this space, in 3 or 4 or 5 years, and look at how it's changed and grown. And now, oh God, this is really cool. Or this now
Hmm.
resonates with me. I thought this was impossible for someone with my skill set. And it turns out things have gotten so much easier or simpler. And let me give that another try.
Right. All right. So, new year, new me. You want to learn new things. Be methodical about it. Have a plan. Just don't go learn everything. Find your learning style. Everybody's is different, and really just be deliberate about it. As long as you understand and you're okay with not learning everything, you are way ahead of a lot of people. And once you're there, you can be deliberate and acquire the skills that you need or that you want. Nate, you wanna leave us with the joke?
Yes, I can do that. I can do that. What do we got here? This fits well with your T-shirt. So I
Ooh,
chose well today.
I might know it then.
No, maybe it's possible. Why did the coffee file a police report?
Something to do with beans or something.
It got mugged.
Ooh, I need a little applause button. I'm actually getting
Yeah.
I'm actually getting something that might have that on it. So,
Ooh, I like that.
uh,
Like sound
I'm,
effect board. Are we gonna get a
yeah,
soundboard for
yeah,
this? Hell yeah.
yeah. So I might get that, and then that was my applause. That was really good. I
Yay.
like that one. I'm gonna go teach that to my kids.
There you go. Learn to learn, everybody.
Yeah. All right. Well, that was a lot of fun. Again, I hope everyone is had a great holiday. I know it's the new year. We have goals for the year. We're fresh. We're ready to go. Things are starting. Have a good new year. Learn the things you want to learn. And as always, you can reach out to us if you have any questions. We'd love to help. If you want to find out more about the book, head over to fundamentalsofswe.com. There are links there for the O'Reilly platform and for Amazon. You can get the book now. It is out. It is being well received. I've got some really good feedback. So thank you for that. We are having a lot of fun with this podcast, talking about some of the topics in the book, but we'll also branch out and talk about whatever the heck we want to talk about. Not sure what that is next week, but with that, we'll see you next
Like
week.
and subscribe. And if you have things you want us to talk about, let us know. We appreciate it.
Ooh,
And
that's a good
and
one.
come
Yeah.
track us down in 2026. Dan and I will be at various places. We'll talk more about that in future episodes. But
Oh,
we would love to see you in real life, as they say.
speaking of, this will come out in the new year, and we will be up at Code Mash the following week. So
Looking forward to
hopefully
that.
we'll
Looking
see
forward
some
to
of you at
seeing
Code
you
Mash.
in the flesh again, my friend.
Yes. Oh, and we have lots of books that we are going to have with us. So
Yeah, we got to
hopefully you're at Code Mash.
figure out how we're going to dole those out. We got to
Yeah.
work on that.
Yeah, we will. I'm sure two of us can come up with
An
something.
idea will come to us.
It will. It will. All right. Thanks, everyone. Have a good one.
Cheers.